want to give an introduction to yourself, and then let's talk about the trial.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Keith McCarran. I worked for the city of Minneapolis for 17 years in the Minneapolis Emergency Communications Center, better known as 911. I worked mostly as a call taker and then some as a dispatcher. And so it was really stressful for me to see one of my fellow co-workers have to undergo that today. And it's interesting to see how it all plays out. One of the things that they talk about the cameras. The city has cameras everywhere. So we talked about, like, one of the things that got talked about today in the courtroom was who's controlling the cameras. So the manager, or the floor manager at 911 does have some control of that camera. If they're viewing an incident, they can zoom in or zoom out, that sort of thing. But then also the precincts have control. They can bring up an incident on their camera. But the main person who has control in the city of Minneapolis, there's a thing called a fusion center. These are the intelligent hubs where, like, all the intelligence from the agencies in the state and even nation are all coordinated through these fusion centers. They got listening equipment all throughout the city. They got viewing equipment all throughout the city, and all these systems are tied together. They even employ, there's so many different pieces of technology that they employ. Like the downtown businesses have their own private web cameras and that sort of thing, but most of those are all networked into the police cameras as well. So the Downtown Improvement District utilizes those cameras as well. And the DID runs out, well, I'll put it this way, they used to run out of the first precinct. It's been a little bit since I've been there, so I'm not sure if they still do, but they also have the ability to pull up these cameras. But the main thing, the main people who can view those cameras and who utilize those cameras is these fusion centers. And there's a few throughout the country. But yeah, so that's the big thing, is the fusion centers are the little bit of part that nobody actually ever talks about or knows about. And they're watching every move you make.
And the one up here is on, like, over northeast, up 37th or something?
Yeah, it's up northeast, I want to say like 37th and Main or something like that. It's like right on the border of Columbia Heights, or it might even be just over the border in Columbia Heights, but yeah, it's up there.
So, well, thank you for that rundown. So, to prompt our viewers, what Keith is talking about is during the trial, the first witness was a 911 dispatcher, and that's your old job.
Yeah.
And so they were also, like, they showed a city camera that was on top of the speedway, and it was like, well, who has access to this camera? And the 911 dispatcher, as you alluded to, watching her have to go through what she went through with the questioning. It was also asked, well, who controls that camera? It was actually like a thought process out in the court today. And so, can you talk about just, like, maybe what a 911 dispatcher in her capacity, what did you learn from, or, like, what is your takeaway from how the jury, or how the questioning of Jenna Scurry happened today?
Well, I will have to say, personally, I was really proud of the way that she stood up under the questioning today. I think she did a fantastic job. One of the things that really stands out for me is she had the moral authority to look and say, this is not right, and I'm going to stick my neck out and say something. And that's what we really need people to do, is when they see something that they know isn't right. We hear it all the time from the government. You see something, say something. Well, it's the same thing with the police. If you see something that's not right, you need to stand up and say something back about it. And, I was really disheartened by the way that the defense attorney was, like, questioning her, like, oh, well, you don't know anything about use of force. You weren't trained in any of that. Yeah, that's right. Maybe she wasn't trained in it, but I can tell you right now, the police dispatchers are exposed to everything from fire calls to medical calls to police calls, and they get it before anybody gets it. If they don't get it, the cops don't get it. So she's really exposed to a lot of trauma, and to just disrespect her that way by saying you're not any kind of expert on this, you weren't trained. She's highly trained, and her gut told her that something was very wrong. I mean, she even made the point that she felt like that maybe the camera had frozen because so much time went by, and that's a critical point. That's a critical point, because any point during that 9:29, they could have stopped what they were doing. There was no need for it, So, again, I was really proud that she took a stand to stand up and call the sergeant, because you don't have that much control down there. You tell the police where to go and what to do, but the end of the line is you've got certain protocols you have to follow, and you do it no matter what. So
and so she did. She called a sergeant.
Yep.
And then sort of touched on like the blue line atmosphere and like the gang atmosphere of, oh, call me a snitch, but I wanted to tell you. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's very important that she said, call me a snitch if you want, but because that's, again, that goes to that culture of, turn your back, that omerta culture. Don't, like they want to say, oh, don't be spreading this, stop snitching, but they don't snitch on themselves. They don't talk about that. And anybody who does cross the line can face some severe consequences. Probably a lot of your viewers never heard of Detective Sean Suter, but he was a detective for 25 years out in Baltimore and was going to testify to federal court about a drug unit in the Baltimore Police Department that was planning drugs to false arrest suspects. And the night before he was going to go testify, he mysteriously ended up shot in the head with his own service revolver. His partner claimed that they came across a suspicious person, and that somehow Sean Suter just approached him and his partner cowered behind the squad car. And then the kicker was his partner called 911 on a cell phone. I guarantee you there's no cop in the world that's got a portable on his shoulder that isn't gonna call on a cell phone to a 911 call taker. Not gonna happen. And on the portables, they have a little button. If it was an emergency where if it was an emergency where his partner had been shot and he knew it, he would have immediately either toned it on his emergency portable, or he would have gone on the air and said, shots fired, officer down. And that triggers a help call. So all available units come right away. The other thing I noticed that was interesting today was the way that car was rocking back and forth, right? So the defense wanted to portray that as George fighting and resisting, but there were 4 cops there, and if one man could shake the car like that, don't you think that would happen many times? But 4 cops were shaking that car because they was beating him, and yet they didn't call for help. So anytime that a police officer's fighting with one, they're going to call in and say, we're fighting with one. That triggers a help call. They didn't do that. They were controlled the whole time. They knew what they was doing. There's no question about it, to my mind.
I want to touch back on something that you have brought up with Scurry. Miss Scurry, do you fear that possibly she'll have troubles in her job now?
Oh yeah.
She sort of crossed that blue line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do. I fear for her for the retribution from cops. I fear, and I fear for her for the retribution from people in the public. And I fear for her from the city. The city itself does not like anybody who questions what they're doing. I know that personally. So it's I really feel for her. I think it was an incredibly courageous and brave and morally upright thing that she did. And knowing her as a person, that's the kind of person she is. And I would stand behind her 100%. But yeah, I do fear for her, and I hope that she is protected and that people realize that she was simply doing her job to the best of her ability.
Can I bring you back to the surveillance a little bit?
Yeah.
So you talked about downtown, the downtown improvement district. Sort of has all these surveillance cameras tied into the private or the corporate world, right?
Yes.
Can you talk about sort of that influence within Minneapolis politics? Like, why is that playing out in such a way, and what's the deal with the surveillance?
Well, to me, I mean, that just shows the absolute point of it's always property over people. You know, it's not the people's safety that's the most important thing. It's the businesses, it's the property, it's the, you know, make sure that things don't get broken into. And the
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. Thanks for joining us. We're expecting another day in the Chauvin trial to get moving shortly. We are expecting Genevieve Hansen, the firefighter, to start testifying, but that could be at 9:30 Central, because a lot of times they do motions at 9 a.m. So, but I think we're expecting them to start at 9 a.m. So we were just watching an interview with Keith, who was a 911 operator and kind of an emergency worker around the city of Minneapolis for a while. We can go back to that piece later. If you want to check it, it was on the end of the long live stream from Monday night, I believe. Also, last night we had a attorney that we talked to as well about a lot of legal issues. We were able to do a live interview there, which was great. So, we really appreciate your support. Unicorn Riot's a 501c3 nonprofit media organization. You can check out our website at unicornriot.ninja. The donate link is up at the top of the website. We try to release everything Creative Commons. Try to really, research and understand the roots of social issues. You can see our website here. It's got a big banner across the top to click on for the trial link. And obviously the trial is leading news websites all over the world right now. So the trial page is here. We try to keep it updated as things go on. We have a contributed series by Mirjan Sadar about 21st century Jim Crow in the North Star City. It's a series looking at, how a lot of the factors of surveillance and stuff that led up to this current situation. Because as we've heard from people, George Floyd is not the exception. George Floyd is the rule. Like, this type of thing has happened to a lot of people. It's just not usually been recorded this way. So this looks at a lot of the history that built up, back when R.T. Ryback was the mayor of Minneapolis. And there's a lot of information in here. It's sort of a deep excavation on the history. And, we're in particular, hopefully this sort of helps bring the younger folks up to speed with some of the trends that led to this stuff. So that's sort of part of the idea there. Another one of our contributors, Sam Richards, has a story about FBI spy planes circling Minneapolis in the lead up to the trial. And Sam was able to pick it off from the call sign audio, which was pretty cool. And then this article, if you want to learn about how to find your own spy planes, it's very, very detailed. It uses this collision detector in the picture to determine the range of the pings that the planes send out. So it's kind of a fun story under the hood for how to detect government spy aircraft. It's pretty cool. So we're expecting this to resume shortly. So we really count on everyone to kind of share our material around, support our work that way. It really helps a lot. Obviously at the end of yesterday, there was this kind of tense exchange between the judge, the defense attorney, and the firefighter Genevieve Hansen, who was trying to explain what happened to her. I mean, all these people are processing probably the most traumatic events in their life. So we're watching the live feed here as they test their switches and flip them around a little. So, all these people are processing one of the most traumatic events of their life. They're reliving it, trying to account for it, and so on, while the defense attorney is trying to get under people's skin, try to upset them, and so forth. And it's pretty tense of a situation for sure. So that's where we left it, and it seems like the judge gets more irate at the end of the day. Like, his big blow-ups have been definitely right at the end of the day, as opposed to like earlier in the day. So that was, pretty tense for sure. So I figure what we'll do here is we can hold for a couple minutes. Usually when they're about to start, we see reflections in that plexiglass down below, and I can see from the other. I can't see anything from the other angles of the cameras right now. So, but again, we're coming on to day 15. If you count every day of jury selection, this is the 15th day. So, it being the last day of March, this thing is expected to go pretty much all the way through May. 4 solid weeks of trial proceedings. So if folks have any questions, put a Q with your comments. I can check questions on YouTube and Facebook for a couple minutes. And if people want to check in with where they're watching from, I can also shout that out. We'll just wait a few minutes here. And again, I do want to give that a pretty strong content warning today. As always, we're going over a really traumatic event, and just be prepared for that. It's not casual viewing. Let's put it that way. It's really tough to watch. All these people are dealing with a lot of trauma, and you see how you see this sort of cynical exploitation. Trauma could distort people's memories and make them feel defensive, and you see the defense attorney trying to press those buttons. So any updates on the Twitch channel? That's a good question from YouTube Studio. I was able to talk to a journalist from The Verge about this, and apparently Twitch told them in general that they have no newsworthiness exception. So, at this point, it still seems like we're suspended on Twitch for the whole month, which is too bad. And, all these companies decide what they like to do. But even if we couldn't run the trial through Twitch, it would still be nice to run the protest through Twitch. But it seems like we can't do that. So we don't have any too much updates besides that. And if anyone wants to contact info@unicornriot.ninja, that's our main contact. You can definitely get a hold of us. Let's see. So, we do appreciate all the, good comments in the chat, and trying to build a space that helps people understand what's going on. It's not easy to understand all these details about these cases, and it's been good to have, for the most part, relatively good chats, I think, because this court is airing in other places. It seems like a lot of trolls are just trolling in other channels, like, to get their dopamine. So I'm looking for questions. I haven't seen too many questions. Okay. I heard someone say the city is planning to be a verdict on the... No, there's really no way there could be a verdict on the 5th. The interview we had last night, helped lay out a lot of that, there's a whole set of things, right? And in the U.S. adversarial legal system, the defense has a lot of opportunities to try to lay what they call the reasonable doubt. They're trying to do the reasonable doubt, and so there's a lot of that. I will add quickly that our streams are not eligible for other people to run in a monetized fashion. This is strictly a non-commercial license that we have, so you can't copy our streams for monetized channels. Let's see, has the defense called any witnesses yet? No, we're still on the prosecution side. It seems like that the defense gets to go later. What was the issue the judge had with the EMT witness yesterday? The firefighter Genevieve Hansen. We might hear more about that soon. It seemed like he was it seemed like he was mad that she was adding information. Like, he was trying to ask a question, the defense was trying to ask a certain question to Hansen, and then it seemed like she was elaborating a little more on that, and that made the judge mad. As far as I can tell, that's roughly what happened. So yeah, usually motions start at 9 a.m. I did see some stuff moving around in the plexiglass, so I was kind of optimistic that it would turn up. Yeah, if people see folks ripping off our streams and monetizing them, you can throw those links in the chat and hopefully we'll see them, or you can email us at info@unicornriot.ninja. Oh, yeah. Thanks for watching from Manchester, Alec on YouTube. I appreciate that. Our Twitch handle is unicorn_riot on Twitch, but yeah, it's been suspended for a month. I guess someone asked, what's my opinion about the trial? I mean, for a long time, I've been very frustrated with how inaccessible the judicial branch is in Minnesota. I don't think it's reasonable that they're always off the air. And so, at least this is a step forward. We get to understand more of what happens in court, which is positive. And it is worth noting, part of the judge's job is to try to prevent situations where appeals and mistrials and stuff at the appeals court can come down. Like, the judge is supposed to try to package this up as a complete trial that doesn't get reversed. And so I think it is important in context to realize that does motivate a lot of his actions, as much as they seem bizarre in the moment. There's a lot of circuitry with judges. What's the story with the cell phone after he chewed out the firefighter? Someone that was helping one of the young people, one of the people that were minors during the event, someone that was like sort of fielding PR to keep the press off their ass, because there's a lot of tabloid reporters in town and stuff. Someone like that took a picture of this young person talking to the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, up on the 18th floor, and the security caught that, and she got chastised by the judge right before 5 o'clock. So that happened there. Hello, Gino from Michigan. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, they're checking the switches. Still nothing. Yeah, we're still waiting for them to start. It feels like they're gonna start soon, but I don't know. We haven't seen much motion. I'm just thinking it'll be in the next couple minutes. But I can try to answer questions. Will in the Northeast, Indiana, Kay from DC. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for checking in, and good morning. Kimberly says, I think the judge loses patience at 4:30 p.m. his dinner time. Wish they had more compassion for the witnesses. I mean, yeah, that's true. Let's throw that marker. Let's see how often the judge gets grumpy at 4:30. I concur with that analysis right now. John in Facebook says, streaming from Omaha, Nebraska, we had a rad showing of demonstrations during the tidal wave of protests. Our police started gassing and pepperballing us before declaring anything illegal. Yeah, it's been really tough. I'll just plug this again quick. If you want to really understand about police tactics, this is honestly one of the most telling stories we did. Just, look up Unicorn Riot, FEMA Field Force Operations, and this is the template training manual. This is what the national doctrine is for all of these riot police, essentially. And, okay, they're back. No, they're not back. They're just still testing their cameras. They're still testing cameras. Okay. So, as I keep an eye on the cameras here. So, yeah, so this manual, if you have some time and you want to understand some stuff about riot police planning and the structures of what they call field force operations, the less lethal weapons, the kettles, the other kind of police lines, and especially how interagency cooperation works. Like, they kind of assemble like Voltrons from multiple jurisdictions. This manual it's not huge, but honestly, if you look through that, you will much more understand these big formations, local police, multi-jurisdictions, This, we published this a few years ago, but it's become useful over and over and over and over again. We published this at the end of the Obama administration, and what we saw in the uprising last summer is all these tactics get heavily used. So this was actually a very significant story in terms of a good example of the kind of research we do, the kind of FOIA research we do. So take a look at that. Honestly, if you have some time, we have a lot of in-depth PDFs and stuff, a lot of in-depth research, and so I think it's very helpful to understand and look at that. TJ, I did not see your question. I'm sorry. Hello, Andrew from Perth, Australia. Let's see what else we got. Gang of Four on YouTube. Shout out from New Hampshire. Thanks for joining us. Jonathan says, I've seen more police presence in South Minneapolis in the last few days. Thank you, Kimberly. We appreciate the support. I'll try to catch any other comments here as we're still waiting. Shannon from Pennsylvania, thanks for tuning in. Rose, thank you. We appreciate your support. Molly got the 5-year t-shirt. That's awesome. Thank you, Molly. It was a big undertaking. We had a lot of t-shirts to throw out there, and it worked out really well. Hi, Cypress from Minneapolis. Let's see, what else we got? Yeah, if you have questions, just try to put a Q on the question comment. The chat is moving fast. It's hard for me to catch. Hello, Citizen Z from Iceland on YouTube. Hello, Alex in Ecuador on YouTube. Yeah, thank you, Danielle. We appreciate the support. It's good. Jojo asks, how did the name Unicorn Riot came to be? It was a funny process. We had some meetings. It's hard to name a media organization, and we started working with these different words, and we just sort of landed on it. It was just, something that was interesting enough to not just sort of be sort of boring or easily forgettable or too long, basically. That roughly that's how we ended up with. The red 3D background, Zephiel asks in the chat there. I can show that a little more. The red 3D background is, I use a program called Mapbox, and this is just a map of downtown. It's a little symbolic, but you can see the IDS Center on the left and the target field up there on the left. And this is sort of from over Elliott Park, roughly. And I just use a program called Mapbox to generate that. Mapbox is really nice. We haven't had the capacity to make some fancier graphics, but I thought it was a good start for the look. So, thanks, Liana, for the support from Minneapolis. What happened to Nico? Nico's fine. Nico's just, Nico hasn't been producing these live, so I just chat with people. Hi, Steve from Minneapolis. Thank you for checking in. That's awesome. So Steve from Massachusetts, thanks. Let's see. All right. Yes. So, yeah, again, we still haven't seen too much motion yet. Let's see. All right. Citizen Z, I remember watching you when your government tried to get rid of the Native Americans over the pipeline. Yes, you can take a look at our documentary, Black Snake Killers. We haven't really been running trailers from that, but that was a full-length 2-hour documentary, and you can take a look at it. Rochelle asks, so the cops know where the city cameras are located, and that was why Floyd was placed on that street, so police body would block the camera. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure if the police have every camera memorized, but that certainly is a precinct camera. It's possible. It's hard to say. Shirag is asking, when is the court feed starting? This is the court feed. This is the live stream. We are monitoring it. This is the live system. There is no, this is it. As quick as we can send it to you. And so a lot of times they do motions at 9 a.m. and then they start testimony at 9:30. So this is the live feed. Thanks, Cindy. Thank you for your support on Facebook. Hi, Stacy from the IDS Center. Yes, the IDS Center is on the left side of the screen. Hi, Angela from England in the UK. And Julian from Brighton, England. Brighton's been interesting. We saw a big protest in Brighton. Question from Bobby, is Derek Chauvin in the courtroom? Yes, Chauvin, let me show you the graphic. So Chauvin is on the right side there in that small inset. You usually see him from that angle. That is the defendant, the former MPD officer Chauvin. So, yes, he is always there. Let's see. Clay from Iowa says hi on Facebook. Let's see. Yes. So, Mirjan Sadar is pointing out, again, Mirjan contributed. He's joining us saying hi in the Facebook chat today. So, Mirjan is pointing out that the Target Corporation really reshaped how the justice system works downtown. And again, it's really covered in detail in that story, and it made it so that the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office would really come after people, throw the book at them, create these, surveillance networks and stuff, the stuff that Keith was talking about. So, again, it's all in the series. There's a lot of stuff in there so far. This is a long piece, but it really is helpful to understanding those underlying systems. Yeah, I'm sorry, TJ. TJ, just put in a Q again. I'll to mark the question. I will try to catch them as I go by. I do have my hands full a little bit. So, yeah, so any minute, really. If they aren't going to do motions, then it'll be another 15 minutes. Bree Garas, are there supplies needed at the autonomous zone? Do you have ways to know how we can donate? I'm sure someone in the chat has a good answer for that. I don't have a proper answer for the donation issues. But I'm sure the information's out there and someone can chime in. Question, why is Chauvin able to listen to the sidebar and the lawyers and the judge? Oh, there's TJ's question. Thank you. So, apparently, the stuff in the sidebars is not supposed to be secret from the defendant, I guess. The lawyer is always allowed to tell the defendant what's in the sidebar, so that's why he's allowed to say, or allowed to hear what the sidebar is. Apparently, that's the logic. The sidebar is not secret from the defendant. It's really mostly supposed to be secret from everyone else observing and the jury. So I think that's the idea. So when I say put a Q for a question, I just mean put the letter Q and then your question, not the letter Q by itself. How is it looking? Which way is it swaying? We're in this phase of the states. The state is laying stuff out. Like we heard last night that the state is use the 911 operator to kind of create the timeline and then plug things in, and that was very interesting. Like, how do you structure it out and introduce the exhibits and then start plugging things in? So this is where the state makes its strongest cases, and so then the defense will get its chance to do all these basically demonizations and stuff like that, and so that a lot of people are asking about the sidebars, but that's my understanding on the sidebars. But so there will be this defense phase that'll probably be pretty frustrating to watch, where they're trying to demonize basically. Let's see. Yes. All right. We got that question. Medical professionals. It's a good question when medical professionals will testify. It's going to happen. We don't know what's happening day to day. We can get a hold of the witness list, and we've also found that the witness list is full of typos, so don't trust the spelling in the witness list if you see it. And we don't know what witnesses they're going to call, but it sounds like they're starting kind of from the middle out. Like we heard, it was build the room. They build the room. They bring everyone to the space by putting the witnesses in. So I think that's how it builds up, and then maybe the medical people. Let's see. Someone's asking about the YouTube chats. We've had the YouTube chats turned on for a couple days. Hopefully people can stay respectful, but we're not going to, let creepy racist troll stuff happen, hopefully. Let's see. Question, why is the FBI involved? Well, you have to be more specific. The FBI gets involved in a lot of stuff. The FBI has Joint Terrorism Task Force. The FBI has surveillance going on. Again, we have this story from Sam Richards that was contributed. You can watch it on our website, unicornriot.ninja, about the FBI system of surveillance that happened before the trial. Will this show audio from the ambulance? Maybe. I don't have a list of exhibits. We might be able to track that down. Merjan Sadar, our contributor, says everyone in Minneapolis should critically question the mayor and city council about the citywide surveillance cameras. And that's a good point. There's the private ones, there's the Downtown Improvement District, which is a pretty coercive public-private partnership aimed at, basically gentrification. And so, yeah, again, Merjan's piece is very helpful in that respect. While the cop car was rocking, could the cops have injected him? Well, a lot of things could have happened off screen. We can speculate a lot about different things. But what's interesting about what Keith pointed out, when the car is rocking, right, which is that interval before he gets pulled out and kneeled on, if Floyd was really struggling to that extent and they actually needed help, Keith pointed out the procedure is they should have radioed for more help. They have a button they could press to call more units, and they didn't do that. And to him, it seemed like that was an indicator something was up. So that's that was, I think, interesting. So when the car is rocking, it's interesting. Another thing, I brought up an interesting little detail. I think it's at about the 28th minute of the overhead camera. Is the camera swings away, it points down at the speedway, and that just raised the question to me: who was controlling it? Why did it turn all of a sudden? It's like Chauvin and those officers are making decisions, but all these other pieces of the city are moving as well. Someone's moving the camera. So that happened, and it's interesting just because, again, it's like we don't all have a clear understanding of how the city surveillance network, the literal motors, are controlled. But it seems like the Strategic Information Center, the precinct, the 3rd precinct, and the 911 operator managers all can control the cameras, probably all at once. So, that's a little detail, but I feel like we're getting somewhere with understanding that. So I thought that was interesting. Okay. All right. Yeah. And I'll mention that too, what someone's mentioning. We've heard these stories that Chauvin and Floyd worked together in a bar and doing security or something. And I don't know. We heard different things about it, and it is an interesting thing because it seems like it could be relevant, but I don't know if it's been confirmed. So I don't want to go too far on that, but it's a thing that, rumors go around, right? So we want to try to put foundations under things. And I don't want to go too far into talking about it, but it'd be great to establish it. The Speedway I'm talking about, Speedway gas station is the one across from where Mr. Floyd got killed by Chauvin. And so the camera's up above the Speedway. I'm hearing now, okay, I have an update. People are still locked down on the fence, and the Kaya, who we interviewed earlier, took a break, but people are still locked on the fence. Why was Trump's Attorney General Barr involved, the federal civil rights case? Well, that was interesting. So people may not remember, but there was this really strange press conference with the Minnesota U.S. Attorney and I think Mike Freeman just before a lot of rioting happened. And it seemed like what was recently reported about that was that Chauvin wanted to get some guarantee that he wouldn't get federal civil rights charges, and if he could get that guarantee, he was willing to plead guilty immediately in state court. And that seemed to be what the leak about it was. And I would all take it with a grain of salt, but there was a weird press conference because Attorney General Barr did not bite on that, and that, I guess that just seems like a logical explanation for why that strange press conference happened. But everything got really, messed up that night because the county was, Mike Freeman could, it's important to remember, Mike Freeman had probable cause to give some basic charges on those police officers pretty quickly, and that didn't happen. And I've talked to lawyers around in the Twin Cities who are like, yes, they could have been detained more quickly, and it didn't happen. And that happened right around the time of also the thing with the Minnesota U.S. Attorney. So that that was again another little detail of how Mike Freeman handled this, and he's now been pulled off. He's been there forever, and so that again, it's a little detail, but it's worth thinking about. So let's see. Question: is there body cam footage? The answer is yes. There's some. I don't have the details. People are talking about the Skyways. We do love the Skyways in Minneapolis. Okay. Elaine says the owner where George worked did confirm that they worked together at some point. So, yeah, so I'd say, like, folks, like, let's try to get that confirmed. Let's try to get it sorted out, because, yeah, it's worth figuring out what the deal was. I'm not sure if the other 3 police are in the same trial or not. Okay, I think what we can report about Chauvin at this point, this is what I will say, is that we're unsure of the specific relationship, but we can confirm Chauvin was an off-duty police officer at El Nuevo Rodeo, 2 blocks from the 3rd precinct, and burnt down, and Floyd was a security guard inside. We are unsure of any specific relationship there, but those facts are confirmed. So that I think we can go with that right now. So let's put the pin there. Because again, it's a small town, Minneapolis. People bump into each other, and this whole case raised something I've talked about with Michelle Gross, the Communities United Against Police Brutality, a bunch of times, which is this off-duty policing, and the way that police you essentially pressure businesses to pay them to sit there off duty, and that's a major element of what police do in Minneapolis. And the fact that Chauvin was part of that system, you would hope brings some more light to it, because everyone's pressured to, have these police off duty. And it's, again, maybe it's back under the rug again, but it was part of the backstory. So, everything, it's all complicated. Nothing happens in isolation. Okay. I think my Facebook chats might have jammed. I'll try it. Let's check YouTube. Let's see. Am I this? No, I did not film on the ground. I usually am doing stuff like helping as a producer. I did not film in Minneapolis last summer. That was Nico and some other folks that were former members of Unicorn Riot. But I was not filming on the ground last summer myself. Someone asked, what if Chauvin's found not guilty? I don't think that's super likely, but it's possible, maybe he'd only get convicted on one of the charges or something, and then things will be very tense, it depends how it happens. So, and that's all very hypothetical. Ika Ketzel on YouTube wonders, I'm for abolishing the police, but I'm wondering how we can keep our neighborhood safe without the police. There'd always be bad people doing harm. How can we protect people from dangerous situations? It's important to remember police are a modern institution. It's important to remember that police were not created, with the rise of organized agriculture, and the settlement of cities. Like, it's a modern institution. And too much stuff is now considered policing, and policing is very tightly aligned with property owners. Again, Marjan's story again covers a lot about property owners and police being aligned. And so imagine what would happen if public safety wasn't so obsessed with keeping rich property owners happy. There's a lot of discussion about abolition. There's a lot of people that have done a lot of serious academic work on the subject, and it's a big subject. There's a lot of details, but it's not new. And a lot of the your pundits are like, oh, where did police abolition come from last summer? That's silly. But it's like, no, people have worked a lot on this. There are places in the world that don't have tons of police. Let's see. So someone speculates maybe Chauvin was on drugs, and cops definitely have been known to take drugs. Like, broadly speaking, I'm not speculating to Chauvin. I'm just saying, police definitely take drugs sometimes. It reminds me of that fact. Okay, let's see what else we got. Andrew's wondering, Hi, yes, my name is Dan. I'm a producer at Unicorn Riot. I'm also one of the co-founders. I gave a quote to The Verge yesterday about us getting suspended from Twitch. Yeah, my name is Dan. I've been working hard on Unicorn Riot, usually in the systems stuff.
Take the recall, Miss Hansen.
Now I'll figure out how to do. Oh, here we go. Finally, thank you, everyone.
And just a reminder, you're still under oath.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nelson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I actually just have one follow-up or final question for you. When you were on the scene on May 25th of 2020, did you show any identifying yourself as a Minneapolis firefighter?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Thank you, sir.
You redirect.
Yes, sure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just as a real quick follow-up to that point, did you have any ID with you at that point in time?
No, sir.
You were not on duty?
No, sir.
Okay. You were asked about seeing the fluid running down the street there, and you considered whether it might be bodily fluids from Mr. Floyd, correct?
Correct.
If you knew that it wasn't bodily fluid from Mr. Floyd, would it have changed your assessment of his medical needs at that point in time?
No, sir. It's just something I noticed.
And your assessment of his medical condition at that time, did you believe he needed immediate medical attention?
Yes, sir.
You were asked about whether you could hear the officers talking. Did the officers ever, let me be more specific, other than Officer Tao, who you told us you spoke directly to, did the other three officers talk to you at all?
Not that I remember.
Did any of the officers tell you, hey, we've got an ambulance coming?
Not that I remember.
Did any of the officers tell you, hey, we got the fire department coming?
No.
You were asked a little bit about what you thought would be a typical response time for the fire department, because that's who you work for, correct?
Correct.
And you were being asked about something you really don't know about in terms of the fire department's response in this case.
Correct.
And you don't know anything about who called the ambulance or who called fire for this particular case.
Correct.
So the answers that you were giving, Mr. Nelson, were just sort of typical case.
Correct.
Yeah, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Anything further? All right. Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
Now the judge is relaxed in the morning. All right, I had to add that after yesterday.
Okay. With this?
Your Honor, the state will call Christopher Martin to the stand.
Come on up here, sir. And if you could just stand there and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat. And we have various barriers and masks on, but we would ask if you're comfortable with doing so to take your mask off for testimony.
That's fine.
And if you could pull up a little bit to the microphone to make sure we can hear you. And we're going to test that out by having you state your full name and spell each of your names.
Christopher Martin, CHRISTOPHER. Last name Martin, MARTIN.
Ms. Frank.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Martin, how old are you?
19.
And can you tell the jurors where you live? You don't have to give us your address, but just generally where you live.
In Bloomington, Minnesota.
Okay. And taking you back to May 25th of 2020, last year, where were you living at that time?
I was living above Cup Foods in the apartments on 38th Street, or Chicago.
Okay. And how long at that time had you been living there?
About 4 months.
And who did you live there with?
My mom and my sister.
So fair to say you were pretty familiar with the area of 38th in Chicago.
Yes.
And on that date, were you in school at the time?
No.
Okay. Did you go on to do some schooling after that?
No, I usually do school in the morning.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
So I went to my mentor's office, which is downtown Minneapolis, and I would do my school online, and then I would take the bus home.
And did you also have a job? Were you working at the time?
Yes, I worked at Cup Foods.
And was that a full-time, part-time?
It was a full-time job.
And so what kind of shifts did you pull there?
I usually work every day except for Wednesday and Sundays, 3 to 8 p.m. or close.
And so what kinds of things did you do at Cup Foods?
So I was a cashier, so I would either work in tobacco if someone would come in, or I could help, like if people wanted to buy things from the deli, then I would help them with that, or just like various snacks.
And so on May 25th of 2020, how long had you been working at Cup Foods by that day?
Probably about 2 months.
And can you just describe for the jurors, what is Cup Foods? What all can customers get there?
So there's actually a deli there, so you can order food. You can get wing combos, Italian beef, sandwiches. There's groceries there, there's toiletries there, and there's tobacco products there, and also there's phone products there as well. So.
And what do you mean by phone products?
So you could actually go, it's Metro PCS, I think. You can buy a phone, set up a plan, and it should be smooth.
Do they also, or does Cup Foods, did they have people that could fix and repair phones and
Yes.
computers? So they did a lot there at Cup Foods.
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay. And didn't I promise you I would tell you to
did.
fix that? Yeah. And so fairly busy store in May of 2020?
Yes.
Get a lot of customers?
Yes.
So the part that sold tobacco, was that separated from the rest of the store somehow?
Yes. So when you first walk in, there's a door. There's a door to your left. If you open that door, that's where you go in and you can get food or snacks or toiletries, as I explained. Or if you go to the right door, or kind of just straight in front of you, that's where the tobacco is.
So is the tobacco part sectioned off from the rest of the store?
Basically.
And so you would work both places, the tobacco area and the regular?
Yes.
And so going to May 25th of 2020, were you working on that day?
Yes.
And that's the date that the incident occurred that brings you to court today, correct?
Yes.
And was your shift 3 to 8 that day?
Yes, 3 to close, yes.
So the store closed at 8?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. And So when you are working, well, let's look at that day. Generally, how many coworkers did you have working with you that day?
About 4 to 5 with at least one manager present.
And so let's go to approximately 7:45 p.m. You were working. Did you have a customer came into the store that you know now is Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Did you know him before he came into the store?
I did not.
Had you ever seen him before in the store?
No.
And what was it about him that sort of gave you notice?
Probably just his size. I could tell that he was big, so I noticed. Other than that, I just saw him as another customer that was coming into the store.
So you said it was his size?
Yeah.
He's a tall guy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry
And
about that.
yeah, did you actually interact with him in the store?
I did have one conversation with him.
And just not what was said, but what was the conversation generally about?
It was about, I asked him if he played football, or no, I asked him if he played baseball, and he said he played football.
And when you were communicating with him, can you describe for the jurors generally what his demeanor was like? What was his condition like?
So when I had asked him if he played baseball, he went on to respond to that, but it kind of took him a little long to get to what he was trying to say, so it would appear that he was high.
So you just had some signs that you thought he was under the influence of something?
Yes.
All right. But were you able to carry on at least some conversation with him?
Yes.
And did you eventually sell him something?
Yes.
And that was what?
The cigarettes.
Okay. And that was sort of later after he was in the store?
That was later on.
Yeah.
The conversation that we had, he didn't purchase anything.
Right. But later when he purchased things from you, you were able to understand what he was buying?
Yes.
When he was in the store, well, I was going to ask you for how long he was in the store. Was it a quick time or was he in there for a little bit?
He was in there for a little bit. I think he came in to make some repairs on his phone, so he might have had to wait in line, and then...
And well, let me ask it this way. At Cup Foods, you're aware that there are security cameras inside, correct?
Yes.
And one of those security cameras is in the back of the store and faces towards the front, correct?
Yes.
And that will capture the employees and the counter where the cashiers are, correct?
Yes.
And prior to coming into court, we showed you a video or a couple videos of the time that Mr. Floyd was in the store.
Yes.
And that is, well, when you saw that, did you recognize that as a fair and accurate representation of the time that he was in the store?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to offer Exhibit 29.
No objection.
29 is received.
Okay, and then Mr. Martin, we're going to play that for you now. And there is no audio on this, correct? It's just video. Is that right?
Yes.
And so we're just going to sit and watch it, and then I'll have some questions after the video shows, okay? Now, I'm going to pause this just for a moment right here, okay? Well, let's see if it can you click forward just a few more frames, please? Let's just keep going here for a little bit. All right, stop it right there, please. Thank you. Now, a couple things, and just for the record, the timestamp on the video currently is 7:34:57. But Mr. Martin, you don't know if that timestamp as the actual correct time that this was being taken, do you?
I do not.
And there'll be ways that we can deal with that later, but you're not, well, I think you've answered my question. So if you would, in this photograph, describe for the jurors, kind of what we're seeing here in the layout of the store. And one of the things I want to let you know is in front of you, there should be a stylus like this, okay? And if you take it and see how you can draw right on the screen? So if you would, as you're just telling the jurors kind of the layout of the store, maybe just mark the screen when you're talking about the different areas of the store, okay?
Okay. So when you enter here, the next door will be right here. This is where tobacco is. So that's kind of how it's closed off. And then if you take a left here, there's a door here, and then these are all the snacks. This is where the deli is located, kind of like tucked off here. Right here is just kind of like my manager's space, usually where they are, kind of watching to see who comes in and out. And then back here, you can't really see it, but that's usually where most of the people are that can help you with your phone. And then right here in the front is just mainly where I sit all day when I work cashier.
All right. And then, Your Honor, I think you can clear the screen in one fell swoop, right? Please? Thank you. And so when we're looking, I'm going to have you identify this individual here.
George Floyd?
Okay, that's Mr. Floyd, who you'd had the conversation with?
Correct.
All right. And then this individual right in here, who's that?
That's me.
All right. And then these other three individuals are coworkers?
Yes.
All right. And so is this the area, when you're cashiering that you work?
Yes.
All right. Except when it's tobacco and that's over back here?
Yes.
All right. Okay, and then we can let it run. Thank you. I'm going to pause right here for another moment, please. You see there's an individual sitting here.
Yes.
You don't have to give us his name, but is he a coworker as well?
Yes.
All right. And so it looks like even just in this frame, at least 4 coworkers, correct?
Yes.
Now, would there be a manager on duty at this time as well?
Yes.
And where would the manager be?
He would be tucked off here in the corner of the store. So it's just like right in the corner. Usually behind his computer working, and then when people needed help, he would pop out and help.
Okay. All right, then let's continue. Thank you. going to stop right here for a moment, please. Now, Mr. Martin, do you see where you are? And just for the record, we stopped at 73728. Do you see where you are in the store right now?
Yes.
And what's that location?
The tobacco section of the store.
So that's where you go to sell cigarettes to people
Yes.
and other tobacco products, I suppose.
Yes.
All right. And then we can continue, please. And while we're watching this, Mr. Martin, can you tell us, looks like windows on the far wall, correct?
Yes.
And what street is outside of those windows?
38.
Is that actually Chicago out
Oh, Chicago, sorry. Were you talking about the ones in front?
Right.
Yes.
The one where the bus is right now.
Yes. That's 38. Sorry about that.
Well, is that actually Chicago out in front of the store?
Yes, sorry, Chicago.
Okay. I'm going to stop you here if we could, please. And for the record, this is at 7:39:09. We see an individual has just walked into the frame, correct? This individual here?
Yes.
And again, you don't have to give us his name, but who is that?
That is the manager.
Okay. So he has come out from the manager area of the store?
Yes.
All right. We can continue then, please. Now, if we could pause here for a moment, please. And again, for the record, this is 7:39:28. We see that Mr. Floyd has sort of walked off the screen, correct?
Yes.
And so what area of the store is that where he has walked to?
The cell phone area.
All right. And then if we can continue. Mr. Martin, then at some point does Mr. Floyd make his way to the tobacco counter to make a purchase with you?
Yes.
All right. So we'll see that coming up here in a minute or two. Mr. Martin, let me pause this right here. For the record, 7:44:36. We see now you standing at the cashier area and seems to be speaking with Mr. Floyd, correct?
Correct.
And were you able to understand the conversation with him at that point?
Yes.
And okay, so let's keep rolling then, please. Now let's stop here for the record at 7:44:49. Where are you now with Mr. Floyd?
In the tobacco section of the store.
And did you in fact sell him something there?
I did.
Do you recall what it was that you sold to him?
A pack of cigarettes.
All right. We saw you reach over to your left. Is that where the cigarettes are stored?
Yes.
And so had he already told you at that point what he wanted?
Yes.
And so you didn't have any difficulty understanding what he wanted to buy from you?
No.
And then did you complete that transaction?
Yes.
And after that, what did Mr. Floyd do?
He then went back outside to his vehicle.
All right. So we'll let this run then to its end. Now, if I'm going to freeze it here, I'm sorry, I said I was going to let it run, but we saw you holding something up. Can you describe, and again for the record, this is 7:45:10, describe for the jurors what you were doing there?
I was holding up the $20 bill that I just received.
And is that something you always do, or something about this?
No, when I saw the bill, I noticed that it had a blue pigment to it, kind of how a $100 bill will have. And I found that odd, so I assumed that it was fake.
Okay. But Mr. Floyd is still there, correct?
Yes.
And you completed the transaction?
Yes.
All right. And then upon doing that, did he leave the store?
Yes.
All right, so now let's let that run, please. So after you looked at the bill, though, he didn't leave immediately, did he?
No.
All right, so that is the end of Exhibit 29. I believe the time there is 7:45:51, correct? Well, I'm asking you, but you saw that on the timestamp on there.
Correct.
So we could look at other video to determine if that time is correct. That's the time he left the store on this video.
Yes.
All right. After he left, did you look at the bill again?
I did.
All right. At the time that you were working on May 25th of 2020, what was the store policy about cashiers accepting $20 bills?
The policy was that if you took a counterfeit bill, you would have to pay for it out of your money or your paycheck.
And it gives you an incentive to be careful about what you take.
Yes.
All right. So, did you think that bill might not be legitimate?
I did.
So, what did you decide to do?
I took it anyways, and I was planning to just put it on my tab until I second guessed myself. And as you can see in the video, I kept examining it, and then I eventually told my manager.
All right. And when you told your manager, what happened next? What were you told to do?
He told us to go out to the vehicle and to ask him to come inside to discuss what just happened.
And when you say vehicle, what are you referring to?
The car, or the SUV, I think, that George Floyd was in.
How did you know that?
I could see it from where I was standing in Tobacco from the store.
So we know from the video that those windows we could see where that bus was, that's actually Chicago, correct?
Yes.
38th runs along the back side of that store.
Yes.
Is there a way to look then out onto 38th from the store?
Yes.
And I guess what I'm questioning is, how did you know he was in that vehicle?
I watched him walk to it.
Pretty good way to know.
Yes.
And so you saw him go out to that vehicle after he made this purchase?
Yes.
All right. And so your manager, what were your instructions?
Just to go out to the vehicle and ask him to come inside to talk to the manager.
And did you in fact do that?
Yes.
All right. When you went out there, well, let me ask you this. How many times did you go out there?
Twice.
So let's talk about the first time that you went out there. Did you go by yourself or with some other people?
The first time I went with one other person.
All right. And you are aware that there is a security video on the restaurant across the street, correct?
Yes.
That's the Dragon Walk was the restaurant?
Yes.
And prior to coming to court, we showed you some security video that captured you and other employees going out to the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And that also shows, we also use some of the footage from inside the store to show when you guys leave the store to go out there. Is that correct?
Yes.
And having reviewed that video, does it all fairly and accurately depict the times that you and other employees went out to the SUV about the bill?
Yes.
All right. Now, we are going to offer Exhibit 31.
No objection. 31 is received.
And again, Mr. Martin.
Okay. We're going to hold on. Let's just take a quick stretch break. Why don't we take 5 minutes?
There's a community that exists, and even if the police were to roll over this place, the people will come right back, and the barricades will come right back up, and they're not going to be able to quash this space.
No justice. No streets. No justice. No streets. No justice. No streets.
Let me tell you that the city killed a man. Yes. And that is why we are here. That is why the community is standing for justice and asking and demanding for justice.
This street does not belong to you anymore, City of Minneapolis. You're going to have to negotiate. You're going to have to give us some justice if you want that street back.
After George Floyd was murdered, the barricades went up and the demand went out. And those demands, the justice resolution, has played a very, very key role in establishing this as a space of protest and establishing this as an autonomous zone. That's been the reason the barricades stay up.
It's for holding the police accountable, it's for demanding justice, and it's also demanding structural changes and investments into the community.
It isn't any one individual demand, it is a collection of needs and wants from this community saying, these are the things that we need in order to move forward to heal. And it's just talking about the beginning steps. And so we're talking about merely $155 million over the course of 10 years, which is really not a huge amount of money when we're talking about the oppression and the systematic racism that has kept this community down from the beginning.
But we understand that this is not the beginning, neither is this the end to justice. Play your role. We're not asking you, we're demanding, play your role. Bring the resources. We have the healers, we have the teachers. Quit pimping us. Quit prostituting us. Expecting us to run into a burning building with a water gun. Give us the resources so that we can now heal our own land with our own bodies. People who look like us, sound like us, move like us, and think like us.
What can change, or what can be different, or what can be better, or what can happen where we're okay to opening up the streets? If we say no justice, no street. And yeah, the 20 to 4 demands is here, but that's just a scratch on the surface, because that doesn't really say Black liberation.
GFS has utilized a partial demand very, very well to prop up the space. And it's a partial demand in the sense that it's not necessarily demanding the complete collapse of the world capitalist system. We say that we hold the space until the demands are met. And the city certainly does not want to meet the demands, and so they won't take back the space. So we're in a sort of crossfire.
They're gonna have to meet those demands before we give up 38th Street. We're not giving it up. 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 No justice. No streets.
One of the big things about how things are defeated beforehand, it's when you don't develop processes and systems that can continue to keep themselves up. At GFS, every day there's a meeting in the morning and a meeting in the night. And that has been one of the ways that like community has really, really developed. And like you look around here, you see like bus stops turned into storage, bus stops turned into a people's closet. You see bookshelves going up. You see we've got a medical shed. We've got a greenhouse.
We've got a library. 612 MASH is a medic organization that operates out of the square. And there's this People's Way. This is a public space, you know, it's a public meeting space, and it's a public space of a real like community and joy and unity. And it's a sacred space, you know, and it's a space of grieving and also of liberation. And so for people who are coming in here, you know, people come from all over. It's almost a pilgrimage site in that way. I think it's something really to be said about how the common spaces and collectively maintained spaces have been like eroded by capitalism. You can see this as a return of the commons in a lot of ways.
In the ruins of capitalism, we've built something new, and something that sort of leaders in the square, Marsha especially, has said before. This is a blueprint for how society can be. You know, how society can be organized, how we can develop community and come here together and meet the needs of the community. Because every day there are people who are unhoused who will come here sort of to find sanctuary. They'll come here and they'll get fed, they'll get clothed, and they'll get resources to get housed. And that's a thing that literally the state has been unable to provide. And the fact that community has been able to come in and fulfill that role it spells out exactly why this is the way of the future and not the way of the state.
It looks like many things at many times a day if you've been in this square. But in all those hours of every day, it still looks like community. It's community.
I'm out here with my passion. I'm out here for my feelings, or because somebody else told me to, or somebody had to convince me to be out here, or somebody to convince me to stay out here every day. No, I made up my mind when it all happened, and this is home. Like, look, this is home. I done ran down these streets.
In my first meeting that I came with a close friend of mine, I was instantly sold because how they embrace black people, especially the black man in this community, I mean, it's beautiful. I've never had a chance to experience this much black love in the area. No hatred, no undercutting. They just want to see the success of a black man here, and that's pretty much what brought me here.
What made me start was at the uprising, the space was filled with hundreds and hundreds of people. So I came out during the evenings, about 5-ish, and stayed till like maybe 6 a.m. or something like that. I barbecued right on the street every night at 9:45, especially when they broke out the curfew. When they broke out the curfew, we had to be in the house at about 10 p.m., or we're gonna get a citation and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, we ain't going home. Spark grills at 9:45 and barbecued until I ran out of food. Costly, very, very costly, because barbecue is not cheap whatsoever, but it kept the square fed at the time. Food makes people happy. Food brings people together. I didn't think I was gonna come out here and be feeding people for 6 months. No. I don't get paid for what I do. That's just out the genuine of my heart. Just like we needed to secure the space and make sure it needed to be secured. Until we find out exactly who's gonna do that all day, every day, I'll take some of my time.
If you're stationed on a barricade, it's keeping an eye out for the police.
We're gonna hold this down. They got an army, we got our own army. It don't matter. They want to call this the United States. It's not the United States. We're not with the system. We are showing them how united we can actually be. So as of that, we're gonna be careful and be aware. And to be aware is to be alive. So be careful out here in every state, for real, and be well protected. And that's all I gotta say. Now I'm gonna have to watch out for everybody.
And it's, opening and closing for residents coming in and out. At certain barricades have like gates that we open and close so people can still get in and out of the space to their homes. We're not trying to inconvenience anybody. We have masks, bottled water, snacks, basic resources like this that we'll pass out to people and we'll greet people coming into the space. I think like the sort of first importance of this space is as a memorial, as a sacred space for grieving a black man who was murdered by the state. And I think it's also grown into a really powerful autonomous community of mutual aid, and really not just envisioning but enacting a community that is as free as we can be from policing and from the United States as a settler colonial fascist government.
GFS it's kind of the epicenter of an uprising, right? And it's been operating very well as a staging ground for other types of struggles that are ongoing in the area, whether that be stuff for Line 3, whether that be stuff in the housing movement, all types of racial justice movements. It's been sort of a center for activists all across the city.
There's many memorials in this space. The biggest ones are for George Floyd, but there's also the Street of Names and Say Their Names Cemetery, which are both really, really moving, large-scale testaments to the memories of lives stolen by the police. And there's also plenty of individual memorials. Murphy Ranks' memorial is down the street there. And honestly, there's so many that really shows the power of this space to hold testament to so many, as well as to George Floyd, first and foremost.
Because it ain't like we ain't got homes to go to. It ain't like we ain't got lives outside of the square, because we do. We're just learning how to maintain and juggle what life is and what the square is. Love you, babe.
No justice, no streets. If they want these streets, they gotta get into these demands. We got solidarity, y'all. We here. They want a little bit of street. They gotta give us a little bit of justice.
So, good morning, everyone. This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. So, we've been hearing from one of the clerks at Cup Foods so far, testifying for the state so far this morning. We are expecting them to come back shortly. So, that video is called Beyond the Barricades, a look at George Floyd Square. I'm going to throw the link again in the chats here for you all. If you want to, please share that out there. Again, we really count on everyone to share our material around as an independent media group. Distribution, we need help from everyone, really. So yeah, we're just waiting for them to come back. This is the live shot of the court right now. And so what we did see during jury selection, which was significant, was that the state or the local officials have been giving these press conferences that were fairly provocative. And earlier in this process, the city officials had said that they would leave the square alone and not try to rip it apart until after the trial was over. And then suddenly it seemed like the policy shifted, and the chief of police was saying that technology would be used and federal agents would come in and that kind of thing. And as I pointed out earlier, it's very sensitive who becomes U.S. attorney, because what we saw was that a lot of community groups do not want Andy Lugar to come back as U.S. attorney because he ran these counterintelligence projects that were aimed especially at minorities, Muslim folks, the Countering Violent Extremism program, etc. And so it is still very sensitive and up in the air as to whether or not the city is going to suddenly try to bulldoze the square during the middle of the trial, as they apparently suddenly stopped ruling out doing during jury selection, which is very strange. So that is a factor we're looking at, keeping an eye on in terms of the square. And it's also true that the police have gone into the square before. We've seen some disinformation from right-wing British newspapers that claiming that that's not the case, and so there is definitely disinfo coming in from right-wing British newspapers about Minneapolis. That's also been happening. So we're still waiting here, them on break. Again, this is Dan at Unicorn Riot. Check out our website at unicornriot.ninja. Let's take a quick look at that. We have a lot of stories on there. Check out the search system. We upgraded our search so you can check out our old stories. We've been going for 6 years at this point, so your support is really appreciated. Someone else asked if we have t-shirts for sale right now. We do not have any swag for sale right now, but if we do make more shirts or things available, we'll definitely let people know. So take a look at our website. The donate link is up at the top. If you can donate, that's what helps make our work possible. Thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to leave the circuit up here because we are expecting them to come back. They're running a solid 5 minutes late right now. Another thing I just wanted to mention, but aside from the judge, there's also, there's the stenographers, there's the clerks. Usually out of court, the judge is oftentimes talking with the attorneys back in the judge's chambers as well. So a lot of stuff happens on these breaks. I don't think they're napping on the couch usually. So I'm just going to leave it on the clock here. But again, check out our website if you get a chance. It was really a lot of good material. The Line 3, the Discord leaks. We have a story on Brazil. We have a story on the housing crisis in Minneapolis as well. So thank you. I'll just leave it up here until they come back. Thanks. Another story I'll mention quickly. I worked on this story with Nico and our contributor Sam Richards about Jake Holes, who is a reporter at KSTP. Some people might remember. Already a lot of years have gone by, but he got famous a few years back for something called Pointergate, where he accused former Minneapolis Mayor Betsy Hodges of making a gang sign because she was doing Get Out the Vote with, someone that had, run into the law before. And J. Cole's basically was carrying water for a pretty absurd conspiracy theory from people in the police that pointing at someone was a gang sign. And literally everyone made fun of J. Cole's for this, even CNN, Columbia Journalism Review. It was one of the most embarrassing examples of stupid right-wing press in Minnesota, and J. Cole's is a great example of a reporter who just, worries about what downtown landlords think and their perspective on the world. And so I made this cover image as kind of an Andy Warhol homage because he looks sort of like Mao with his hair like that. But anyway, J. Cole's, what he was doing, what we cover in the story, was he went on Joe Souchere's Garage Logic show, and he explained that the police had been working on giving him tips to try to demonize the people in the square and trying to take Marsha Howard as this person who they were falsely claiming was basically the queen or the boss of the square or whatever. And so we analyzed the disinformation, the way that KSTP and Hubbard Broadcasting carry the water for police disinformation. So he's probably, he's well known as David Brower, who has been a media analyst at MinnPost and other places for a very long time, pointed out at the time that J. Cole's, is well known to be Mr. Softball, Mr. Carry Water for police narratives in the Twin Cities. And so we really analyzed, and he said a bunch of bizarre stuff about the DC thing as well. That's right. He had to retract because he claimed that Antifa raided the Capitol on January 6th by apparently misrepresenting a quote someone gave him. We're still waiting for court to come back. We've been keeping an eye on it. But, it's important here to understand how corporate media and how, in particular, KSTP, Hubbard Broadcasting, powerful broadcaster, controls FCC regulated airwave broadcasting, and J. Cole's has been there for so long, and he's always been there to push the police line. And so he's a great example of a Twin Cities reporter who, in this case, was taking stories that the police were handing him and trying to puff them up and make a demonization, and then go on this podcast with Joe Souchere and claim that, the so-called autonomous space is so scary. So, yeah, so to clarify, yes, we do have some, shady right-wing British newspapers in Minneapolis right now, but we also have, in particular, J. Cole's saying ridiculous things, whether it's Pointergate or taking stuff from the police and making things up and going on Garage Logic, or claiming that the leftists and Antifa were the people that attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. All of that can be laid at the doorstep of J. Cole's Mr. Pointergate himself. So that is a detailed story, which we did do. I started writing it last year, and Nico and Sam pulled together a ton of great material, so it is very detailed. And again, it's like City Pages is not around anymore. Usually somewhere like City Pages would be a place to get local media criticism when the corporate media is so embarrassing. But, they got shut down by their owner. The Star Tribune owner bought City Pages and then shut it down. So media is even more consolidated in the Twin Cities than it was before. And that means, who's going to hold J. Cole's accountable? Who's going to hold KSTP accountable? That's a great question. So there's a lot of detail there. We've got clips in the story just sort of showing him explaining, Cole's explained, how these police that have a grudge from the precinct being destroyed were feeding him stories. We're working on just feeding him stories. So it's all in there. You can take a look. J. Cole's. It's on our website. That ran back in January. So thank you all for tuning in. I just wanted to mention that because it is important that these certain reporters are well known to just accept whatever the police feed them about Pointergate or George Floyd Square. It's all the same type of tactics over and over, scaring suburbanites and not really accountable to anyone, whether it's WCCO, who has an anchor who's married to the former police federation leader, or to Jake Holes, who just repeats gibberish from that he believes without cross-checking from the police union. It's all the same ridiculousness, and that's the Twin Cities corporate media in a nutshell. So we just got to add that, it's a good piece to take a look at if you're unfamiliar. So thanks again for tuning in. These guys have been out for 20 minutes when they said it was 5 minutes, nearly 20 minutes. Thank you, everyone. This is an early rumor, but we're hearing the delay might involve the jury, unfortunately. We don't know for sure, but it seems like it might be a jury thing. We'll just hold it there for now. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Dan at Unicorn Riot. So, obviously, they've been away a great deal longer than we expected at this point. So, I'm going to run it back to I'm going to bring up the interview with Keith that we were watching earlier, and we'll just go back to the interview with Keith. And as soon as Court comes back, we'll bring it back. So, again, Keith was this 911 person, longtime veteran, insider of the emergency services systems in Minneapolis, so that was a really good insight that he gave us the other night. Okay, I'll give it another minute here, and if they don't come back, then we'll resume Keith's interview that we were running earlier today. Thanks again for your support, everyone. Yeah, it seems like the rumor is that it involves the juror, but we don't have that confirmed in writing yet, so we'll just have to see. I'll just wait a minute. We'll run the Keith interview. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll keep making our way minute by minute here. Thank you.
The matter is, any business can be replaced. The business owners have insurance, and they're supposed to, and any property can be replaced, but a human life cannot be replaced, ever. And so the other thing is, Target Corporation is a big sponsor of the police department, and they've actually helped out with security. They have all kinds of security systems, and they've helped the police develop their own security systems. And nothing happens in a vacuum. We held the Super Bowl here, and the city retained all the cameras that came from the Super Bowl for the security, so they had the option of saying, yep, we're done with that, or, oh, we'll pay a minimal fee to be able to just keep these cameras. And they chose to keep all the cameras. So, when they host these events, there's all kinds of implications behind that. And we've seen that. We see it now with all the fencing. We see it with the National Guard. We see all this. And very interesting that they say they've been planning this since June. Remember that this happened in May 25th. And by the next month, they were planning the response. So that's very telling. They got caught by surprise, I think, and they decided that wouldn't happen again. So that lets us, the people, know what lengths they're willing to go to make sure it doesn't happen again. They already shot out people's eyes. They ripped out flesh from bodies. They terrorized people, and that's just the beginning.
Yeah, well, that is a lot. Thank you for that. And you brought up Target. We have a contributed series on Target on Unicorn Riot website, and it talks about some of what you're talking about of how they sort of implemented the safe cities planning.
Yep.
And then from there on, those installation of the cameras got turned out throughout the city.
That's right.
And so you're also talking about the NSSEs, and can you talk about maybe what is your opinion on, or how does that work when the city has actually given the option, if they want to keep the surveillance equipment that they were equipped with by the government, to run a national special security event? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the policy was, but I went to the budget hearing, and I went to the public safety. I went to the public safety hearing that they were given the option, and the chief said, yes, we want to keep these cameras. So it just shows you how policing is tied into the capital and into business and into property. It's always portrayed as we're keeping you safe, but so many people can testify it's not about keeping you safe. It's about property, always about property. And if you begin to observe that, you'll notice. And to me, it's a whole system. We know that the policing started out with slave patrols, and we know that during the period of Jim Crow and the lynchings that a lot of these times these people were able to get into prisons because of the police that were part of the Klan, that were part of the people who were doing the lynching. And so they did that. And then now they just moved the plantation, is what I like to say. They moved the plantation to the mass incarceration system. So now we've got this most imprisoned population in the world, and they've decided how to monetize it. And now you can actually purchase stock on Wall Street in the correctional facility. So this is the ultimate capitalist dream. They've kept the plantation system alive, and they stock it by hunting slaves out on the streets like these little petty marijuana arrests that they've made for decades and decades. All kinds of things, spitting on the sidewalk and loitering and, you know, all these things. So we can see how they've created a whole plantation system. They're still doing the same job that they were doing 400 years ago, but they don't know it. And the other thing, I really want to key this because a lot of people don't understand this. Policing and working for the police is a culture, and you are enculturated from the minute you start. You're conditioned from the whole time, all the time you're conditioned. And so you begin to believe every single thing they tell you, and you can't see your way out of the box. And I really believe that that's the way that a lot of these police officers don't see what they're doing, is because they're so conditioned, they're so brainwashed, basically, effectively brainwashed. And you see it, you know, so.
How did you, as a 911 operator, come to this realization?
So for me, my personal story was, I was upset when Trayvon Martin was killed. And then when Mike Brown was killed, I was really upset. So I started marching with Black Lives Matter. And I got some static for that from some people. They were like, you can't do that. They're anti-police. And I used to say, no, they're not anti-police. They're anti-bad police. And shouldn't everybody be? And so while nobody could say, you know, you need to stop doing that.
I believe we were dealing with Exhibit 31.
Correct, Your Honor. And just for the record, if I did already offer Exhibit 31, I will, just for the record, re-offer Exhibit 31.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, 31 is received. Do you wish for it to be published?
Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Martin, what I'm going to do now is start playing Exhibit 31. And just like the previous video, at some points we'll just stop and I'll ask you some questions about it, all right?
Okay.
So for the record, this is starting at about 7:55, and I think 46 seconds roughly on the timestamp on the video, correct? Now I'm going to pause it right here because the first part that we watched showed you and somebody walking out of the store, correct?
Yes.
And that portion of the video is from the security camera inside the store, correct?
Yes.
And so the person that you were walking out with, and again, you don't have to give us his name, but it was a coworker?
Yes.
All right. And so now we're looking at a separate camera angle from outside the store, correct?
Yes.
And this timestamp, obviously different than the previous one because this shows 2019-12, correct?
Correct.
And do you recognize what area is depicted in this video as we're looking at it right now?
This is 38th Street and the side of Cup Foods.
And if you can use the stylus too, just kind of point out, the door of Cup Foods and 38th in Chicago. So that's the door, correct?
Correct.
And then
Correct.
which street is 38th, just so we're clear? Okay. And Chicago then is the other street depicted, right?
Correct.
And is the counter where you sell the tobacco products visible in this image?
Correct.
And where is that? And so for the record, you've drawn a small line sort of on the window on the side of Cup Foods, right?
Correct.
And so when you told the jurors earlier that you were able to look out and see where Mr. Floyd went, did you use that window to look out and see that?
Correct.
All right. And so then let's, Your Honor, if you could clear the screen, please. Thank you. And then we will roll this video here for a little bit. Now I'm going to stop it here. And so can you tell the jurors then when you crossed the road and went to this vehicle, obviously the video shows you approaching the passenger side, correct?
Correct.
And why did you approach the passenger side?
Well, I didn't want to stand on the driver's seat side because that's where George was, but there's also oncoming traffic that I wouldn't be able to see, so I chose to go around.
Okay. Why didn't you want to go to the side where Mr. Floyd was?
Because of the oncoming traffic in the
So
street.
it wasn't about Mr. Floyd, it was the traffic.
Yes.
All right. And so we see you then here sort of behind your coworker. And tell us about then, did you have a conversation with the occupants of the car?
Sort of. I notified them that they needed to come back into the store and that the bill was fake and that my boss wanted to talk to them. To George, actually. Sorry, not to both of them, just to George.
And so when you approached the car from the passenger side, did you see how many people were in the car?
3.
And where were the 3 people in the car?
George was in the driver's seat. His friend was in the passenger seat, and there was a woman in the back seat in the middle, or possibly on the right back behind the passenger.
And so had you seen any of those individuals before that day?
No,
Had you seen them in the store earlier?
just the male.
And when you had this conversation at the vehicle, who were you talking to?
The person that George was with.
So the guy in the passenger seat, the front
Correct.
passenger? And did you make any observations at that time of Mr. Floyd?
Correct.
What did you see regarding Mr. Floyd?
He just seemed like he didn't want this to happen. Like he was just kind of like, oh, like why is this happening? Sort of a thing.
Okay. Did he seem awake?
Yes.
And did he talk to you at all?
Not really. He just kind of shook his head.
And the passenger in the front passenger seat, did he talk to you at all?
Correct.
And I want you to tell us what he said, but the end result, did they agree to come into the store?
No.
When you were there at the vehicle, who did you do most of the talking to?
The person in the passenger seat.
And did you think that you were talking loud enough for the other people in the vehicle to hear you?
Correct.
And so then after that conversation, what did you do after that?
I went back inside with my coworker.
And when you got back inside the store, what did you do?
I told my manager that he did not want to come into the store.
And did you get some further direction then from your manager?
Correct.
And what was that?
Go back outside again and tell him to come inside the store so we can talk to him.
All right, so try it again, in other words.
Correct.
And then for that second trip, did you go with some different, some other coworkers?
Correct.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is start Exhibit 31 up again, and we'll watch that process, okay? So now I'm going to stop Exhibit 31 here briefly because the image has changed, correct?
Correct.
And now this video is of the inside of Cup Foods again, correct?
Correct.
And so we'll see here that you come in, and this is when you had the conversation with your manager about the first trip.
Correct.
All right, so let's let 31 run again, please. Now if we can stop here for a moment, and the timestamp reflects 7:57:56. You've kind of walked off screen, correct?
Correct.
And what was going on at this point in time?
I think that was the conversation I had with my manager when I was saying that he did not want to come inside, but I'd offer to pay, but he said no, just tell him to come back inside.
So did you tell your manager you would just take care of the 20?
I believe so. I did.
And but he directed you then to go back to the vehicle again.
Correct.
Now we saw you go out on the first trip with another individual, another employee.
Correct.
And he did not come back into the store, did he?
No, he left.
Okay. And so when you were told by the manager to go out a second time, did you take some other coworkers with you?
Correct.
Whose idea was that?
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, so let's run Exhibit 31 again, please. So let's pause the video right here if we could, please. And for the record, now we're back outside again, correct?
Correct.
And the record should reflect that we paused at 20:21:43. So we see that two other individuals coming out before you, correct? And there's appears to be a woman in a black jacket, correct?
Correct.
And is she a coworker, or was she at the time?
Correct.
And she worked there longer than you?
Correct.
And the other individual has a white T-shirt on. Had he worked there longer than you?
Correct.
And is he actually related to the owners of the store?
Correct.
And so they were out ahead of you at this point, correct?
Correct.
In fact, you had to sort of jog to keep up with them, didn't you?
Correct.
And all right, so let's run 31 then. Now let's pause here just for a moment, please. The record should reflect we're at 20:22:15 as the timestamp when we paused it. The individual in the white T-shirt initially went up to the driver's side, correct?
Correct.
And we see you standing here behind the SUV, correct?
Correct.
And eventually the individual in the white T-shirt went around to the passenger side door, which was open.
Correct.
And were you able to hear the conversation that the guy in the white T-shirt was having with the occupants of the vehicle?
At this point in time, I was not able to hear.
So then let's run the video some more, please. All right, now we see, if we can pause here, please. This is 20:22:21. You walked up to the passenger side of the SUV, correct?
Correct.
So at this point, were you able to hear the conversations that the individual in the white T-shirt was having with the occupants?
Correct.
And were you also able to hear what the occupants of the vehicle were saying and doing?
Correct.
And can you describe for the jurors then what occurred during this period at the SUV?
So in the second time we went out, the person in the passenger seat was doing most of the talking. We were telling him, just come inside, we just want to talk to George. And the person in the passenger seat was saying how, that's not me, like, I tried to use a fake bill and you put me on game, so I ripped it. And that'll happen in the video because he also tried to use a fake bill that I did not let him use, and then he ripped it and he put it on the ground there. So he was just explaining like what had happened.
And so, just to be clear, you said the passenger seat, you're talking about the front passenger seat?
Correct.
And at that time, did you have any interaction with Mr. Floyd directly?
I do not recall.
All right. So let's run Exhibit 31 a little bit. Now I'm going to pause it here real quickly, please. And for the record, it's 20-22-34. We saw the individual in the white t-shirt sort of bend over and pick something up. Can you tell the jury what was happening there?
He was picking up the fake bill that the individual in the passenger seat tried to use.
Okay. And you referenced earlier one that was torn in half?
Correct.
Is that the bill that was torn in half?
Correct.
All right. And let's keep running 31 then, please. I'm going to ask to pause it right here, please. The timestamp reflects 20-23-35. It appears the two of you are now walking away from the SUV, correct?
Correct.
So during those preceding moments, it appears that the two of you are talking with at least some occupants of the vehicle.
Correct.
And did you have any conversations with Mr. Floyd, or was it just the front seat passenger?
Just the front seat passenger.
Were you able to see Mr. Floyd at all during that interaction?
Correct.
What did you see about him?
As I said earlier, he was just kind of shaking his head and putting his hands in the air, like kind of like, why is this happening to me? Like, I don't want this to happen, sort of thing.
And so he appeared to be awake?
Correct.
And so what was the end result of that conversation?
George Floyd did not choose to come into the store.
Okay, neither did the passenger front.
Correct.
All right. And so then let's watch Exhibit 31 run here, please. All right, so that the end of that video shows you and the other individual entering back into the store, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you got back into the store, what did you do about the two trips out to the vehicle?
We told our manager that he still refused to come into the store.
And do you know what the manager decided to do about that?
He instructed one of my coworkers to call the police.
And so did you know if that happened?
Correct.
That somebody did call the police?
Correct.
Was it you who called the police about it?
No.
Was it another coworker?
Correct.
And did you ask the coworker to make the call?
No.
And were you present when he made the call?
Correct.
Okay. So you were there next to him or something?
Correct.
And so at some point, did the police respond to the store?
Correct.
And when they responded, did you see the officers actually come into the store?
I do not recall.
All right. Did they deal with you when they came to the store?
No.
Do you know who they dealt with?
They went and talked to my manager.
And you were not involved in the conversations with the officers at all at that time?
No.
So what did you do?
I was still working cashier.
Just went about your business?
Correct.
And as you did that, as you continued working, did you notice a commotion out in front of the store?
Correct.
Do you recall what it was that sort of first drew your attention out there?
I just saw a few people at first, and then the crowd grew larger, and pretty soon the store was empty as well, so there was no one that I needed to help inside the store, so then I proceeded to go outside and see what was happening.
When you saw this crowd gathering, where was the crowd?
It was right where the bus stop is on Chicago.
So kind of right in front
or
of
a
the
little to the left.
Right in front of the store?
10 paces.
I'm sorry, I spoke over you.
Sorry, I was just saying it was just 10 paces to the left of the bus stop.
All right. And so the bus stop, as you're looking out from the store? Does that make sense?
Correct.
Okay. And so did you, in fact, decide to go out and look into what the crowd was gathering for?
Correct.
And when you went out there, what did you see?
I saw people yelling and screaming. I saw Derek with his knee on George's neck on the ground.
So let me back up just a little bit. Now, you say Derek, do you mean Mr. Chauvin?
Correct.
Now, did you know who that person was at the time?
No.
So you've just learned his name since then?
Correct.
So was that person wearing a police uniform?
Correct.
And where did you see that individual?
On top of George Floyd.
And you didn't, well, other than seeing Mr. Floyd that day, you did not know him before then, correct?
Correct.
Did you recognize him as the person who had been in the store earlier?
Correct.
And the person that you had tried to talk to in the SUV?
Correct.
And did you see any other officers in the area?
I saw, I think his name is Officer Tao.
And where did you see him?
He was in front of the crowd, kind of telling people to stand back.
And do you remember about how many people were in the crowd?
Probably about several.
And when they were, well, what did you see the officer on Mr. Floyd? What was the relation of their two bodies? What was happening there?
George was motionless, limp, and Chauvin seemed very, he was in a resting state, meaning like he just rested his knee on his neck.
And what did you do when you saw that?
I pulled my phone out first and I called my mom and told her not to come downstairs, and then I started recording.
And did you make a recording?
Correct.
Did you keep that recording?
No.
Why not?
Later on that night, I deleted it because when they picked George up off of the ground, the ambulance went straight on 38th instead of going straight on Chicago. And if you live in South Minneapolis, the easiest way to get to the hospital would have been straight on Chicago. So that to me kind of made it like clear that he was no longer with us.
So you thought he had died?
Correct.
Not quite sure why that would, make you delete the video.
Oh, I just didn't want to have to show it to anyone or be questioned about it.
And so after you called your mom, you started taking a video, what did you do after that?
I was recording until one of my coworkers was pushed by an officer.
And so what had you seen the coworker do right before the push?
He was yelling at the officer, kind of how the other people in the crowd were doing, and asking them to check his pulse, if he's breathing, see if he's okay, kind of thing.
So did he leave the sidewalk, the curb area, and go onto the road?
Correct.
Okay. How far?
I do not recall.
Okay. This coworker of yours that got pushed, do you know how old he was that day?
I do not recall.
Is he older or younger than you?
Younger.
So, a teenager.
Correct.
And after he got pushed, did you see what happened to him or what became of him?
Yes. My other coworker just like grabbed him up and brought him inside.
So removed him from the scene?
Correct.
And prior to coming into court, did we show you a security video from Cup Foods that shows that area?
Correct.
And that area while you were out there?
Correct.
And did that appear to depict truly and accurately the time period during which you were out there during this incident?
Correct.
And Your Honor, I'd offer then what we've marked as Exhibit 33.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
33 is received.
All right, so now I'm going to start showing Exhibit 33, and we may pause this like we had done the other videos, all right? I'm going to pause it right here for a moment. You recognize this scene?
Correct.
And this is you in the foreground? Right?
Correct.
And what were you doing right at that moment?
That was when I was calling my mom to tell her not to come down the stairs.
And if she were to come down the stairs this is where you were living, correct?
Correct.
Is the door she would have come out, would that have been in this scene?
Correct.
Can you take that stylus and just show where that door would be?
It would swing open right here.
So if she had come down, she'd have come right into this scene, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then you talked about a coworker who was younger than you who came out. Is that the individual in the white t-shirt?
Correct.
All right. And, okay, so then we will continue to run Exhibit 33, please. I'm going to pause it right here, please. For the record, this is 8/28/34. And can you describe for the jurors what you're doing at this moment?
I was recording the scene.
So this, you had walked farther over towards the scene?
Correct.
And really by the door where your mom would have come out if she had come out?
Correct.
And the individual in the white t-shirt, he had stepped off the curb into the street here, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so then let's continue to run Exhibit 33, please. And we're going to pause right there, please, at 8/28/41. Is that the moment you were talking about when your coworker got pushed?
Correct.
And did you see it all anywhere in there where he touched the police officer?
No.
And so then you are now standing around behind that group of people, correct?
Correct.
Did you know anybody in that crowd?
My two coworkers.
All right. So right now, if you could just put like a line or a dot on where your two coworkers are. And both of those are individuals who went out during the second trip to the SUV, correct?
Correct.
And did you know any of the other people there in the crowd at the time?
Not at the time.
Okay. Did you know Miss Funari?
I think. Yes.
You know Alyssa Funari?
Yes.
And was she there at the time?
Correct.
Do you see where she is now?
Correct.
All right. And how did you know her?
Just through school.
And All right, so then let's continue to run Exhibit 33, please. Now, I'm going to stop right here, please. Can you describe for the jurors then what we're seeing, what's going on there in that segment of the video?
That was when one of the coworkers kind of grabbed up the other coworker and brought him back inside, and I was just yelling like, "Chill out, chill out, chill out."
And so when his coworkers came to get the young man in the white T-shirt, he went with them back into the store.
Correct.
And you were following them?
Correct.
All right, so let's continue to run 33 then. Now I want to pause here for a moment, please. For the record, 82904, can you tell the jurors what happened, what you were doing here, I guess?
At this point, I think I was just kind of emotional, and I went to the African American that was standing there in the curb, and I was just like they're not gonna help him. This is what we have to deal with. So.
Okay.
Sustained.
Yeah,
That'll be stricken.
That's fine. So you had a conversation with another person standing there.
Correct.
And when you walked up there, we saw just before I stopped it, there was a young girl there in a green shirt. Did you see her when you were walking up there?
Correct.
You remember seeing her in the store earlier?
Correct.
Did you know who she was?
No.
And you remember being the cashier when she was in the store earlier?
Correct.
And then can we continue to run Exhibit 33, please? I'm going to pause here for a moment. The record should reflect 829:55. We saw you standing there with your hands on your head for a while, correct?
Correct.
What was going through your mind during that time period?
Disbelief and guilt.
Okay. Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
We also saw another individual get pushed by an officer, correct?
Correct.
And what did you do after that happened?
I was just trying to calm him down, tell him to stand back.
So, and all right, so let's continue running 33 then, please. Who are you talking to there, Mr. Arden?
My mom.
Okay, so that takes us to the end of Exhibit 33. You were going back into the store.
Correct.
And so then did you just continue to work your shift?
Correct.
And so did you continue to work at Cup Foods as long as you could?
No.
Why not?
I didn't feel safe.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Nelson.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here today. You testified that you currently are 20 years old.
19.
19. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. And at the time, you were both living and working at Cup Foods, right? Or in the apartments above, you were living and working there.
Correct.
All right. And you testified that you had worked there for about a month and a half to 2 months before this incident?
4 months.
4 months. Okay. You would agree that you've made a few statements in connection with this case?
Correct.
You were first interviewed by agents of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and FBI back on September 10th of last year. Do you recall that?
Correct.
And then you have had another meeting as of March 12th with the prosecutors and other agents of the BCA, right?
Correct.
And you understand that those statements were recorded?
Correct.
And you understand that we've been provided with transcripts?
Correct.
Have you had an opportunity to review your statements prior to coming into court?
Yes.
All right. And you had an opportunity to review your transcript?
Correct.
All right. So I just kind of want to walk through again. We've now watched a few videos from both inside the store, outside the store, and from a neighboring business. Agreed?
Correct.
And you've had an opportunity to address some things that happened inside the store, outside the store, throughout the whole incident, right?
Correct.
All right. So, you were working, your shift you said started at about 3 p.m. that day?
Correct.
And this incident ultimately was around the 7:30 to 8 o'clock hour, right?
Correct.
And you, video, when we were watching the first video, you and your coworkers seemed to get along quite well.
Correct.
Talking, laughing, having fun, interacting with customers, things of that nature.
Correct.
And the store is sort of like a one-stop kind of a store, right? You can do a lot of things in the store.
Correct.
They've got a deli, you said. You've got cell phone service, cell phone repair, snacks, and then there's the separate tobacco area, right?
Correct.
Now, in the store, is there, where we see you behind the counter, is there an entrance for employees into the tobacco area that you go through?
Could you ask the question again, please?
Sure. So I understand when a customer comes into Cup Foods, there are essentially 2 doors that they can go through, right?
Correct.
One of them on the right-hand side is the tobacco shop, right?
Correct.
And the one on the left-hand side is the convenience store, or the general store, right?
Correct.
All right. And the tobacco shop is separate because you have to be a certain age to go into the store, right?
Correct.
You have to be 21, right?
No.
18?
To buy products or to simply go into the store?
To go in. No, to go into the tobacco portion.
I'm not sure there's an age requirement. People came in no matter how old they were.
All right. Is within the store, is there a partition or some sort of glass that inside the store separates the tobacco area from the convenience store?
Correct.
And so my question is where you stand, like, do you have to walk out through the convenience store door and go into the tobacco store door, or is there a separate entrance where you can get into the tobacco portion?
From where are you starting?
If you were the cashier there, right?
Oh, you can just walk over to the tobacco section. You don't have to go all the way around.
Right.
If that's what you meant.
That's what I meant. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'm sorry. I may have not been articulating that as well.
Yeah, no worries. That's
all right.
My fault.
And you were in the store and you observed a person who you later learned was George Floyd come into the store.
Correct.
And you ultimately assisted him in the store.
Correct.
And he was in the store, and the person that you observed in the front passenger seat was also in the videos we just watched, right?
Correct.
He had on a pair of red sweatpants and a white t-shirt, I believe.
Correct.
All right. And did you have any interactions with him while you were in the store?
Correct.
I believe you said that he had also attempted to use a counterfeit bill?
Correct.
But you stopped him?
Correct.
Did that happen before or after your interaction with Mr. Floyd?
Before.
All right. And so when he handed you that bill, you knew that that bill was a fraud?
Correct.
And you immediately kind of said, hey, I'm not taking this bill?
Correct.
Right? You knew the store policy at that time, right?
Correct.
And the store policy being if you took a counterfeit bill, that became your responsibility.
Correct.
And so it would get deducted from your paycheck, in other words.
Correct.
And you have some sort of like store tab where you could buy merchandise yourself at the store or services, and it would get deducted from your salary?
Correct.
All right. And so that interaction with that other individual, approximately, was it earlier in the day? Was it, a few minutes before you interacted with Mr. Floyd? How long before did that happen?
Earlier in the day.
All right. So both Mr. Floyd and that individual had been in the store earlier in the day as well, right?
Correct.
And was that an hour, 2 hours? Do you recall?
I do not recall.
All right. And but you remembered him when he came back in the store later in the afternoon?
Correct.
You remembered he was the guy that had tried to hand you a counterfeit bill from earlier?
Correct.
He hadn't changed his clothes, didn't look any different?
I don't think so.
Okay. And so when Mr. Floyd and this other individual came back in the store, we observed kind of him walking around the store, right?
Correct.
And you were helping other customers, you were talking to your coworkers. It's fair to say you weren't paying a lot of attention to what Mr. Floyd was doing at all times he was in the store.
Correct.
But now that you've had an opportunity to see the video, you get to see some of his other interactions and things of that nature, right?
Correct.
Now, there were other customers in the store. The store's a pretty busy store, right?
Correct.
And your manager that you talked to, did you notice that he had what appeared to be a pistol in his...
Correct.
Okay. Do you know him to carry a firearm at the store?
Correct.
And when you watched the video, did you see Mr. Floyd sort of do some little dance at one point?
No.
Okay, we'll come back. But you didn't observe that when he was in the store?
No.
All right. And if it's on the video, it would be on the video, right?
Correct.
All right. Again, so at some point, Mr. Floyd appeared to purchase some food as well, right?
Correct.
That being a banana, it looked like in the video?
Correct.
Did you sell him the banana?
I do not recall.
Okay. And when he handed you that $20 bill, you testified that you immediately knew it was a fake.
Correct.
Did it appear to be the same type of fake or maybe even the same counterfeit bill that you had refused earlier in the day?
Correct. It did appear to be similar.
All right. And you took that bill and you held it up and you kind of looked at it through the light, right?
Correct.
What were you looking for?
That's a good question. I have no idea.
Right.
I was just looking at it. I don't know.
But you immediately recognized it to be a counterfeit bill.
Correct.
And some bills have like a metal or some sort of a stripe through it. Could you have been looking for something like that?
I'll be honest, I don't know what I was looking for. I just knew it was fake.
All right. You could tell based on the texture of the bill?
And the color of it, as I stated earlier.
Yep.
It had a blue pigment.
So, and you had a pleasant interaction with Mr. Floyd.
Correct.
You were asking him about sports and things of that nature, right?
Correct.
And you formed the opinion that Mr. Floyd was under the influence of something.
Correct.
And you base that on sort of, I think you said, a delay in his speech and response, right?
Correct.
So you were unlike a conversation that we may be having right now, that's rapid, and if you asked him a question, there would be much more of a slowed or delayed response.
Correct.
And I believe in your interviews you also indicated that he was having some trouble with certain words.
Correct. I think he was trying to form the words.
Right. So he was delayed in his speech, and you believed him to be under the influence of something.
Correct.
All right. And you were present when your coworker called 911?
Correct.
And do you recall him telling 911 that he appeared to be under the influence?
Correct.
And you had also had, by the time 911 was called, you had had 2 other interactions with Mr. Floyd outside of the car.
Correct.
All right. And so you made the decision after Mr. Floyd handed you this counterfeit $20 bill that you weren't going to call him out on it like you did with the earlier bill.
Correct.
And was that in part because you felt maybe he's under the influence?
Partially. Partially, the other person that had come in, it kind of seemed like he was trying to scheme, like he knew it was a fake bill and he was trying to get over. I thought that George didn't really know that it was a fake bill, so I thought I'd be doing him a favor.
Okay, trying to help him out. And could you have, I'm just asking generally, could you have just let it kind of go and then told your manager later, hey, put it on my tab?
Correct.
And but you made the decision to talk to your manager, show him the bill, and your manager instructed you to go talk to Mr. Floyd and his friend out in the car.
Correct.
So when you went out to the car the first time with your first coworker, you had a relatively short conversation with him, right?
Correct.
And you went to the passenger side of the vehicle, and the person in the red pants and the white t-shirt, that was the same person that had previously tried to pass the fake $20 bill.
Correct.
And you were encouraging them to come into the store.
Correct.
You were kind of saying, you got to come in, you paid with the fake bill, we got to deal with this, right?
Correct.
You specifically told them that he had used a counterfeit bill.
Correct.
And that they needed to come in and either pay for the cigarettes or
talk to my manager.
Or talk to the manager, right?
Correct.
Okay. And how would you describe the general tenor of that conversation? What I mean by that is, was it pleasant or was it more aggressive?
It was pleasant. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form aggressive. It was just pretty annoying.
Yeah, just come on in, guys. It was your first attempt to kind of say, hey, come on in, guys. You got to deal with this, right?
Correct.
And you were trying to be polite to these gentlemen.
Correct.
Right. And you then had that conversation. And during that first conversation, you said that Mr. Floyd was not really speaking to you, right?
No.
And you said that he was kind of putting his hands up and putting his head back and things of that nature, right?
Correct.
And you then went back into the store, talked to your manager again, and told him they were not agreeable to coming into the store.
Correct.
And the second time you left the store, you were sort of following the other coworkers, agreed?
Correct.
And you would agree that that video sort of showed the 3 of you almost run out of the store.
Correct.
And you wanted to get them before they drove away, right? Or why would you run the second time?
Correct.
I mean, just so they didn't drive away, or for some other reason?
Correct.
Now, in terms of the second exchange at the vehicle, the coworker went to the driver's side at first, right?
Correct.
And you stayed back a little bit, right?
Correct.
And then you brought back up to the vehicle, right?
Yes.
And you heard what was the conversation, you heard what was being said, both by the passenger of the vehicle as well as your coworker.
Correct.
You indicated that the passenger pulled out the other $20 bill, right?
He picked it up off the ground.
Why was it on the ground?
Because he threw it on the ground.
The bill that Mr. Floyd used, was that still in the store?
Correct.
And so this other $20 bill was he threw it on the ground, right?
Correct.
Your coworker picks it up, and who ripped it?
The person that was in the passenger seat.
Or he handed it, your coworker handed it back to him or something? Or did he rip it and then throw it on the ground?
The person in the passenger seat ripped the bill, threw it on the ground. The bell was talking to him, and the person picked it up and it's in a bell.
Okay. And again, this conversation was primarily with the passenger of the vehicle.
Correct.
And there was a female in the back seat of the car?
Correct.
Was she engaged in the conversation at all either?
No.
All right. So, and Mr. Floyd, again, he was not really part of the conversation at that point either.
Not really.
He didn't say, you don't remember him saying anything?
I would say I do not recall.
Okay. But again, you described his behavior, I think, as kind of just shaking his head, putting his hands up, putting his head back, things of that nature, right?
Correct.
The second conversation, was the demeanor of, or the tenor of that conversation more heated?
Yes.
And there was an outright refusal by either Mr. Floyd or his passenger to come back into the store?
Correct.
And it was based on that conversation that you decided to, or it was decided by your manager to call 911?
Correct.
And again, you were present and heard the 911 call?
Correct.
Now, in your initial conversation with agents, when they were asking you about approaching the vehicle, do you recall describing it as a hot block?
Correct.
What does that mean?
A lot of situations happen.
And do you recall describing your conversation and the words that Mr. Floyd was having trouble saying?
Correct.
Do you remember now today what words Mr. Floyd was having trouble saying?
No.
Would it have been baseball? Do you remember saying that? Do you remember? You don't remember? Would it refresh your recollection?
I do not recall.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection to view a transcript of your statement?
Absolutely.
I'm on the wrong page, I think. Here, give me just a second. I apologize, I can't find it right now. We may come back to that. Do you recall describing some other behaviors of Mr. Floyd while he was in the store?
Correct.
And what were those behaviors?
He was doing a couple of stretches, like a lunge.
Okay.
Kind of.
Like kind of stepping forward like this?
No, it was more of a side lunge. Start here.
Like that?
Correct.
So, for the record, I'm standing kind of feet together and stretching over to the side with one leg, right?
Correct.
Putting his arms in front of him. And kind of based on your observations of his behavior, his speech patterns, that's what caused you to form the impression he was under the influence.
Correct.